Hi, this is Leland Chi, creative executive at Lucasfilm, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
I'm the new Padawan learner. I'm Ahsoka Tano.
Ahsoka, you are making a mistake.
Maybe. But I have to sort this out on my own.
The Apprentice lives.
My master could never be as vile as you.
Anakin Skywalker was weak. I destroyed him.
Then I will avenge his death.
Revenge is not the Jedi way.
I am no Jedi.
Ahsoka Tano! Bo-Katan sent me. We need to talk.
I hope it's about him.
This is Ashley Eckstein, Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. This is your weekly spoiler-free place for Star Wars community and conversation. I'm your host, Dan Zare, delighted to be talking Star Wars with each and every one of you. Since May of 2013, whether you are a fan of the Star Wars films, Disney Plus live action and animation, books, comics, collectibles, or Star Wars opportunities at the Disney theme parks, you are among friends as we virtually share a cup of coffee while talking about this galaxy far, far away. Thank you to the official travel partner of Coffee with Kenobi, MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. Check out coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel for a no-cost, no obligation quote, and let them know Coffee with Kenobi and Dan Zare sent you. Coffee with Kenobi is also brought to you by Thomas Coffee, a fresh artisan coffee expertly roasted since 1905. Thomas Coffee provides customers of all taste palates with a delicious coffee profile customizable with over 25 flavor offerings. There's a taste for everybody and an experience with every cup. I have a special discount code exclusive to CWK listeners. Use the code DANZCWK10 for 10% off your first order. On today's show, it's here. We're going to talk about parts 1 and 2 of the Disney Plus Ahsoka series. The much anticipated series is out, and we are so excited to break it down with everybody. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi. Here we are. It is time to review the Disney Plus series Ahsoka. I am, of course, your host, Dan Zare, and I am joined by two co-hosts, and we're going to do something really, really special for the Disney Plus series Ahsoka. And I talked about this on CWK Live this week, so thank you again to all of you who joined us. It was really fun. We had a massive crowd enjoying the live, kind of the Ahsoka pre-hype, but now it's time to talk about it. For Ahsoka, we're going to have two regular guest co-hosts. They're going to be joining me for each and every episode where we break down Ahsoka, and I could not be more excited. I've got a dream team here. My own crew of the Ghost. First, let's bring in Jen Sopchockchai. Jen, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here. Still hasn't sunken in that we're going to be doing this every week. I'm so excited. But I will say, to get us started, I never had the talent, the abilities, not like Ross, but I'm so happy to be here.
Also joining us, our other regular guest co-host for analyzing Ahsoka is the one and only Ross Hollebon. Ross, welcome to the chair. How do you like it? How do you like these Coffee with Kenobi co-host chairs?
These are fantastic. It's great to see you in your Ahsoka hat. Mm-hmm. And I was already over the moon about doing this. And then you told me Jen was joining as well. And I was just like, this doesn't get much better. And this is going to be so fun.
It's going to be great. And I do want to say, Ross, Jen has the special co-host heated seats. You're gonna have to audition once or twice, then we'll see if you get the same pair or not.
We'll make that work.
Yeah, right on. And okay, good. So we're gonna talk all about this. We've got 2 episodes to discuss. We'll try to kind of break them up. We'll do like a little bit on the first one, a little bit on the second one. The first episode, part 1, is Master and Apprentice. The second one is part 2, Toil and Trouble. So let's start off. Well, before we dive into each individual episode, it's pretty great because I've got perhaps one of the top Ahsoka fans in fandom in Jen, and one of the top Sabine fans in fandom in Ross. So, I mean, ideal. Jen, let's start with you. What was your anticipation like for Ahsoka when it was first announced and then leading up to watching the first 2 episodes?
So anticipation incredibly high. I was overjoyed, overwhelmed when we first saw Ahsoka in live action in The Mandalorian. And, I've been with this character since 2008 when I saw the Clone Wars movie in theaters. And it's been just so amazing to sort of be with her this whole time as she grows and changes. And so to kind of delve more, because I feel like in Mandalorian, we only got little bits of her, right? She was, a very important figure in many episodes, but this having the sustained look at where she is in her journey right now is really exciting to me.
I agree. So was it hard to sleep the night before? Were you like totally, we've got our own little texting thread, the 3 of us, and I knew that you were very excited.
Yeah, so I think the hardest thing was yesterday was my first day of classes, and so I had to start off the semester focusing on that, and it was really hard. My mind kept drifting to it's how many hours left until Ahsoka.
I understand. Ross, what about you? What was your excitement level like? Because when this was announced, it wasn't like it was a given that Sabine was in the show, because it wasn't. And then that information slowly trickled out. We got the cast reveals and things like that. But talk about your excitement for it when you first heard the news and then leading up to right before you hit play.
Yeah, I think immediately, as soon as, whether it was rumors or whatever of, hey, this is coming about, I try to avoid that stuff, but it was just like, okay, this makes sense, and I really hope it happens. And it just kept building. And then I remember Filoni telling Rosario on the stage in Anaheim, why don't you bring out some of our friends? And having Chopper roll out on the stage and seeing, I'm getting chills right now because I remember sitting there watching it and just being like, oh my God, this is happening right now. And then Natasha came out as Sabine, knowing she's going to be Sabine. And I'm just like, oh my God, it's all real and it's happening. How can we fast forward to the release date? So everywhere in between, I have been excited. If not, probably more recently, hiding from everything that I could, trying to avoid any potential spoilers.
Oh, I agree. I very much agree with that. And obviously, I guess it's probably prudent to mention, if you haven't seen parts 1 and 2 of Ahsoka, clearly you should pause and we will wait for you in the cafe. We will heat up our coffee as much as it takes until you're ready to listen. I was very excited about this from the beginning. Of all the Disney Plus Star Wars shows announced, including Obi-Wan, including Andor, everything, I was more excited for Ahsoka than anything, because I've long said she is one of my favorite characters in the history of characters. I love her. I think she's tremendous. I remember even walking out of the theaters when I saw Clone Wars for the first time, the first showing, and I remember saying to my friends, like, they were complaining about her. I was like, she wasn't so bad. She was kind of fun. Little did I know she'd end up being Ahsoka, right? And then when the cast was revealed, I had that initial reticence of, well, wait a minute. That's not Tia Sircar, and that's not Vanessa Marshall. And, those things that we go through, and we're sort of 50-50 blessed with the same actors that are the voice actors are also the live action. And there are all kinds of reasons that are people far smarter than I are making those decisions. And that's fine. So if I had any kind of anticipation or trepidation, my anticipation was very high, but if I had any trepidation, I just didn't know how these characters would translate into a live action. Like, would I accept these actors? We talked a lot for years about Rosario Dawson and not having Ashley Eckstein, having Rosario Dawson. And I think it's pretty much been a pretty nice success. And I do want to talk, of course, about the episodes, but I do think it makes sense to talk about how did they work for us, or do you want to save that for the end? What do you think, Jen? What do you think? You're the one with the heated seat. You get to decide.
I think we can talk about it now, because I think, to go to what Ross was saying, there weren't really a lot of clues that this would essentially be Rebels season 5. The only clue was probably the epilogue. So actually, spoiler for Rebels if you you're listening. Although, why are you listening to this?
Right. What are you doing? Watch Rebels. Yeah. It's way better than this show.
But I feel like the epilogue of the finale of Rebels, the final season of Rebels, with Ahsoka and Sabine, really would have been the only indication of like, oh, there's more story here. There's and story that Filoni would want to pick up on. So I think that this is the key challenge, and I think from watching these first 2 episodes, very successful on some fronts, not as successful as in others in terms of like connecting those dots between Rebels and this. Especially in terms of characters, like characterization, because when you're doing animation, there's so much more that you can do and so much more that's fantastical that you can do. And so that was one of my concerns actually going into the show is like, well, how hard is it going to be to translate a lot of that to live action?
Right. And I think that matters because we do love Rebels. We're all massive Rebels fans. I've said it a million times. I think Rebels is the best thing Disney's done with Star Wars, including the cinematic stuff. Well, Last Jedi might be close, but I'm not ready to say it's Rebels season 5 because Rebels is an entire ensemble cast, and undoubtedly we will hopefully get to that. But this has a very different feel, different atmosphere, different tone, and some of that is because of the cast. Let's just start with the titular character Ahsoka, played by, again, Rosario Dawson. Ross, try not to think about Rosario Dawson in previous versions of Ahsoka, but just in these 2 episodes, what did you think of the performance?
I think she's fantastic. I think she is I think seeing her somewhat muted personality in some of this means that she is all business right now. And as these 2 episodes unfold, you learn that there's something else nagging at her as well. So we're getting to see a range of emotion from someone who has, as the character, as Ahsoka, has learned how to kind of shut things off in that way. But something's really impacting her now. So to me, that just enhances the gravity of the situation of, hey, you know what? Something's a little bit off right now, but it's not the performance. The performance is genius, and that's why it seems off.
Okay. Jen, what about you?
Yeah, I have to say that I struggled a little bit initially, especially in the first episode, with just the sustained stoicism in the performance, because the Ahsoka that I know from other contexts has such a vibrant personality and has like a playfulness and a humor. And so initially I was like, wait, what's happening here? In a way that I hadn't, I think, with her appearances in The Mandalorian. But I agree with Ross. I think it's not the performance necessarily. It's where the character is at this moment in time, where we're dropping back into the story. And so there's a line that Hera has where she says, you know, your master must have been frustrated with you at times, right? Or like she kind of nods to like, you know, you're being the grumpy master right now. But, you know, you used to be the Sabine. That's sort of what she's trying to tell her, right? And so that moment really made everything click for me to be like, oh, you know, I'm struggling with this not because of anything that's actually happening in the episode, but because Ahsoka is in a different place in her life. And that we're just going to have to stick with this and see where it goes. And I think it does leave a really big runway, as sort of Ross was alluding to, for her to kind of come around. And so I feel like just because she's very serious and kind of melancholy in these 2 episodes does not mean that she's going to be that way for the rest of the season. I think that would be really exciting to sort of see as she sort of mends her relationship with Sabine and they kind of get back in the groove, that sort of the old Ahsoka comes back out a little bit more.
That is what I'm hoping as well. And I'm not sure if either of you saw the review I wrote. I tried to actually hold back some of my comments in the review for the show, but I too won't say I struggled with Rosario's performance in the first 2, because I also thought, you know what, she's older, she's a bit more stoic because she's in a very unique place where there's a lot of self-doubt about some situations that we're not completely familiar with. We're not intimately acquainted with her and Sabine's training. We didn't even know that she really trained Sabine. We didn't even know that Sabine needed training. We've all seen Rebels. She's quite an adept fighter in Mandalorian. She is a force to be reckoned with all in herself. So, and she doesn't seem to have force abilities, which I think the episodes kind of reinforce for us. So I've talked to a lot of people who did some reviews as well, and everyone, the general consensus seems to be, why is she like so stiff? Because Ahsoka can be stoic, but she's very playful, and she's very compassionate, and she's very kind, and she's like, if you walk into a room and there's a new kid in school, she's the first person to go up to the new kid, right, and make them feel like they're a part of the family. But I agree with the both of you. I really think and hope that this is all happening because she's in such a weird place. You know, sort of, there's this weird mystery. There appears to be a lot of guilt for whatever happened with Sabine. She can't even look Sabine in the eye, which I thought was a cool touch. I hope that we get to see, Rosario Dawson is fabulous, and she is in Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett. And I hope we get to see her do some more expressions besides that one arms folded stoicism, because Ahsoka is so much more than that. And let's be honest, Dave Filoni's, he didn't write every episode, but he's directing them. He's helping, he's making them. This is his baby. He knows this better than we do. So I am hopeful that this is just some internal character stuff, and the ice will thaw as time goes on.
Well, and I think her ship has an incredible defroster, because this is jumping to the end of the second episode. We get that spark. And we know that the spark is what Star Wars is all about with hope.
Mm-hmm.
We get that spark through the last line that Ahsoka delivers in the second episode. So I think it's already right there, ready to take off. I won't divulge at this point because this is early on.
Yeah.
But that's where I was just like, oh, yes, here we go.
Excellent. Well, I want to talk. I'm going to start with this one. I want to talk about Hera Syndulla, Mary Elizabeth Winstead. Winstead, is that how you pronounce it? I think it's Winstead.
Yeah.
She, in real life, she's of course married to Ewan McGregor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, former guest of the show. Hi, Ewan, if you're listening. Unlikely that he is. This is the one that's the hardest for me. I think Hera is an elite character in the Star Wars universe. I think that she has a gravitas, a compassion, a fierceness about her. She commands every room that she's in, but it's not through a conscious effort. It's more just like, that's just who she is. And, it's super early. I think it got way better in the second one, especially when she was sort of like the mother figure and talking with Sabine and trying to be subtle to guide Ahsoka without telling her what to do. I thought it got better. But early on, she is not Hera to me. And I am very much struggling with it, with the performance. Even the point when, they're trying to make sure that robot, that droid's head doesn't explode. And she says, I say we see what happens. Like, kind of playful and careless. And I'm thinking, and maybe she's trying to alleviate tension, but the way that line was delivered, I thought that is not the Hera that I know. And again, that she's a great actor. Dave Filoni is a genius. I am sure that the ghost will pull up and everything will be fine. But I'm a little trepidatious. I'm a little nervous about her as Hera so far.
I'm going to agree with you on that one. I think it actually took me by surprise that when she started speaking, there was a clash in my head. I could hear Vanessa Marshall. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I would say that about any other character that's ported from animation to live action. Like, there was just some sort of cognitive dissonance where I was like, who is this? And I think that probably speaks more to Vanessa Marshall's indelible voice performance as Hera than the other way around. You know what I mean? I think it's just going to take a little time to settle in to this version of the character. And so, like, yeah, I couldn't really pinpoint anything that was wrong. It just, my brain just couldn't handle someone who is not animated Hera. And so I thought that was really interesting that was happening with that character and not with the others, because I did not, when Rosario Dawson first appeared as Ahsoka, I did not have that experience. I very fluidly accepted her as, I was like, oh yeah, this is Ahsoka. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I think part of that is her function in the plot of this story seems to be, she's the diplomat, she's the, as you said, the sort of mother figure. She's trying to get them back together. And I think that is kind of like taking precedence over, like, this is the show's called Ahsoka and it's starring Ahsoka and Sabine. It's not, she's like kind of a means to an end in a lot of ways. It's at least so far.
Ross, just like the Emperor is not as forgiving as I am, that's just kind of what happened right there with Jen and I's opinion. Tell me what you think about Mary's performance as Hera so far.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a while to get there. Like, it is, I think it is how people thought of Cad Bane in seeing him in live action. And like, oh, his eyes aren't as big. And all of those different elements where it just like, you know what? It's going to translate differently from animation into here. I love Vanessa Marshall. Like, right away, and Dan, you've kind of alluded to this already. I love Rebels because of Ashley Eckstein, Vanessa Marshall, Taylor Gray, Freddie Prinze Jr., Tia Sakar, and Steve Bloom. I love that show because of them. I love this show because they put me in the place to love this show. So I think just kind of transitioning into this different medium for it is a great thing, and something that we're going to become more accustomed to as we get into each episode. And I think it's also something where we've just had Andor somewhat recently, which is one of the greatest television shows in my mind of all time. And it happens to be a Star Wars show. There are going to naturally be comparisons there of, hey, are they elevating the same way? And Filoni is a different storyteller, and this is a different type of story. So I think some people maybe it's just resetting some expectations, but I'm excited where Hera is going and what we're going to see out of her once we get her. She's been flying now. It got better when she was flying and was able to play off of Chopper some. All of those pieces are like, okay, it's building up, and here we go.
Chopper is the bomb that soothes everything. I don't disagree with that at all. He's my favorite. But no, I appreciate what you're both saying. I just for me, that shouldn't have to be the case, because it is not the case for Natasha Liu Bordizzo as Sabine Wren. I'm going to lead off on this one too. I could not love her performance more. It's the same leap. You're taking one character from animation, bringing them to live action. I don't even care, who is playing them. She is magnetic. She lights up that screen. I think she is a stone cold scene stealer. And she, to me, is the breakout star of this series, no matter what happens. Well, I shouldn't say that, but I reserve the right to say that, because who knows what the rest of the series is going to look like. But she is magnificent, absolutely magnificent. The vulnerability, the edginess, the attitude, the way she looks, the way she acts. I don't feel like she's acting. I feel like she's inhabiting this character. To me, it's like Sabine walked off of an animated image and into live action seamlessly. So much so, Ross, are you ready for this? I think, and it's super early and incredibly small sample size, I think I like Sabine more in live action than I do in animation because of this incredible performance.
I need to see her tag something first. So as soon as she breaks out the spray paint guns, that's when I'll be able to go to that level.
She also hasn't blown anything up. So.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I don't know. Am I being hyperbolic? What do you think? What do you think, friends? Jen, what do you think?
I thought she was a standout as well. But, the more I thought about it, I'm like, why? Because I tried to kind of catalog all my reactions to all the characters. And I was trying to think about, why is it that she seems so perfect? And then I'm kind of like not there yet with the other characters. And I think it's because she's the only character in these episodes who gets a character introduction. And I actually had an epiphany about Ross.
That's true.
And his love of Sabine, because I was like, Sabine is rock and roll. Like,
oh yeah, totally.
That's why Ross loves her so much. And I feel like that's what they really established so quickly with her. And I love the sort of visual callback when she's on the speeder going down that kind of runway to that. That's how we open Rebels. That's the first image we see is of Ezra. And so like, I thought that did a really good job of kind of tying it back to referencing Ezra, referencing Rebels, sort of showing that like she is left behind and is being haunted by his absence. Right. And so, but at the same time, totally shows her personality where she's not, doesn't show up where she's supposed to. And they try to get her to go back. And she's just like, I have one of the best lines in that episode, I think, is I have a new order for you. Get lost.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And just the needle drop there, the music, everything is firing on all cylinders to express to us, this is who this character is. And I don't think we actually get that with any of the other main characters.
Ahsoka walks in, very through the mist, and it's a beautiful shot. But yeah, we don't get a hero entrance only for Sabine. And maybe this is more about Sabine and Ahsoka, and that's fine. Again, not to belabor the point, but it doesn't have to be all about Hera, and Hera doesn't have to steal the show, and she doesn't in plenty of episodes of Rebels at all. But there's a gravitas, and that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm optimistic will happen. So yes, I think Natasha is great. I could not wait to text you, Ross, but I didn't want to spoil anything for you. I couldn't wait to see what you thought about her. The rock star, Jen. That is outstanding. That is great. We'll quickly address the two villains, then we're just going to jump into the episode. We've got Baylan Skoll, played by the late, great Ray Stevenson, and then Shin Hati by Ivana Sakno, Sakhno. Feel free to correct my pronunciation if you know it. Jen, we'll start with you. What do you think of these two?
I thought they were great. I think they have a lot of mystique to them. I'm very interested to learn more about them. I love the idea that in their pairing, Baylan is the former Jedi who got lost in the Clone Wars, and also I love how we learned that right through Hu Yang's kind of analysis of the lightsabers. I thought that was really cool. But that he has adopted this apprentice post Jedi Order, post the fall of the Jedi Order, and is like forming this master apprentice relationship with her, kind of mimicking what he knew in his old life, but at the same time, very much going in a different direction. And I like the idea that they are maintaining some of these traditions. They kind of seem like Jedi, right? Some people will assume that they are Jedi, and they're definitely not Sith because they're not a part of like the system. I think that's what's so interesting about the era in which we're dropping into the show is that like there's no Jedi Order, there's no Jedi, there's no Sith as institutions. And yet people are still kind of identifying potentially as one or the other or being in between, like Ahsoka is already. And so the idea that they're mercenaries, it's just, yeah, I think they have a lot of potential. They're very complex. I'm very intrigued to learn more about them.
Ross?
Yeah, and see, she does have a Padawan braid, correct? Is that just a decoration?
I think so.
She has a
I
braid.
don't remember.
I was taking it as a Padawan braid, so I was just like, okay, we have red lightsabers and a Padawan braid.
No, they're orange.
Okay,
they're orange. It's very distinct. But Dave Filoni confirmed this at Celebration Europe. These are orange lightsaber blades.
All right. So yeah, we have that different approach there, and what they're doing. What I find fascinating about them is just. He seems just kind of over it with everything. And she is so wide-eyed and hanging on everything he says. But then the looks that she gives Morgan Elsbeth are just incredible. And it just makes me wonder what's going on in her head and what that could mean later along the journey.
I agree. And honestly, like if I wasn't told specifically they're orange, I wouldn't have seen it. Even looking at it, I had to keep telling myself, okay, those are orange. I guess they are. Like there's just a different hue, and I know people see orange and red differently. And isn't there a great episode where Ross says he's wearing a salmon colored shirt? So that's what I was thinking. But yeah, it's orange, and I think that poses some interesting things. I find that these two absolutely fascinating and totally riveting. And I think Shin particularly, there's something so menacing and haunting about her. The look she gives to everybody, but especially when she is looking at Morgan Elsbeth, when she finds out that she is her ancestors are part of the Night Sisters, which is a super cool thing in and of itself. Like that is some A+ level acting. I really like the relationship. I love the fact that, well, as you said, Jen, they're not Sith. They're clearly not Jedi, but they're mercenaries. This is a completely new twist yet again on the concept of being a Force wielder and using the elegant weapon of a lightsaber. And this is not for knowledge and defense. This is for money. And that's fascinating. And Rey,
money and power. We learn at the end.
Yes, yeah, because she's
right.
What are we going to get?
What's in our future? Power. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, and it's great. And Ray Stevenson, when he walks down that hallway in the beginning, it has that Vader Rogue One vibe, which of course is not an accident. But yeah, I'm all in with these two. I'm looking forward to the retro action figures that have never been reported, and I'm just wishfully thinking of them. So many cool options. I think it's time to get down to the actual individual episodes themselves. Part 1, Master and Apprentice. Jen, give me one word to describe the episode for you. I'm so glad you're going first instead of me. And overall reactions to the first episode.
Sure. Well, so the one word I had come up with sort of applies to both. Like I had sort of been thinking about both episodes together. But that word is mystical. And for me, what's the most exciting thing about this show is that it's kind of continuing the legacy of Dave Filoni, expanding and deepening the lore of Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And that's really exciting. That was one of my favorite parts of Rebels, is how it really kind of like introduced so many new things, but we're still consistent with what I knew from before. And it gets a little trippy. It gets a little, it's magical. And so that, to me, that was the most exciting thing, because we get all of the sort of Indiana Jones-esque treasure hunting, puzzle hunting, maps, and it's all that is there. There's a lot of mystery there, both for the characters and for us. And I just love that tied into that is this sort of, which is actually very classic Star Wars, this conflict between mysticism or superstition and being more pragmatic, or like not believing and not believing in something that's unexplainable and mystical. You go back to, what is it? General, I can't remember his name now. Gotti? No, from the original trilogy. He says to Vader,
Mahdi?
Mahdi, thank you.
Mahdi?
Sorry,
yeah.
I knew I was going to get there.
That's all right.
Don't come after me, please. But he had, we can trace it back to all the people, the Imperial officers sort of making fun of Vader for his superstitious religion, right? And your ancient religion, your superstition. Like there's at least one or two quotes, I think, that kind of reference that idea. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that was a tension that I saw running through these episodes as well, right? Because the Morgan Elsbeth, we learned that she's descended from the Dathomir witches, and she has that conversation. Actually, now I'm skipping ahead because this is the second episode, so sorry about that.
That's all right.
But there's kind of like what's real and what's not real. What's just a story? I thought these were just stories, but turns out that's where Thrawn and Ezra went, right? So there's a real mission, but it's tied to all this kind of mystical stuff. So that was really sort of the most intriguing and promising thing for me about the story that we seem to be getting.
Excellent. Ross, one word and overall thoughts to Master and Apprentice?
I'm going to say integration. And this is at a practical level. So what we're talking about with characters transitioning from animation into live action, but it's also the narrative level and the backstory and how hard it must have been to say, how am I going to kick this off right now so I can bring in new people who have never watched a animated Star Wars thing ever and pull them in while also taking care of the diehard fans like us who have watched it one time through, 2 times, 3 times, maybe 4 or 5 times. That's a lot of audiences that you're serving and trying to do justice to both, knowing that Star Wars is carrying the Disney Plus platform and they need The Mandalorian to happen again. So I think it is that integration and the responsibility, like the difficult responsibility that we know Dave Filoni takes so serious to serve the fans because he served under George Lucas.
Excellent. I'm going to hyphenate my word, which is probably cheating. Professor, is that cheating? I will say profoundly promising. I'll say profoundly promising. After I watched the first one, because I watched them a couple of times, and after I watched it the first time, I thought, this is gorgeous. Like the camera work, the cinematography, the way Filoni seems so conscious about making it seem like big screen Star Wars. The way he lovingly shoots the starships as they're coming out of hyperspace or just panning through them. It's just gorgeous. It's just so gorgeous. And Kevin Kiner's music, I wrote in my review, I think he belongs now in the same conversation as John Williams, because this is a masterpiece. These 2 tracks, I mean, this is cinematic Star Wars. This doesn't feel like you're watching anything on the small screen. This is big stuff. And I liked what you said about, Jen, the mysticism element of this, because this feels extraordinarily mythological in its scope and its tone and its purpose and its reverence for the other things that are connected. The only thing that I understand is going to give some people pause is that they're not completely aware maybe of Rebels. And in fact, I had students the other day who told me they've never heard of Ahsoka. And to me, that's like, what? But
what time is their detention?
Well, they're still.
Yeah, did you just sign an essay on Ahsoka?
Yeah, no, that's a great challenge, right? Because I've got a semester to sort of see what they think. I did jokingly say your homework is to watch Ahsoka, and it is a mythology class, so perfect, right? But I think if you didn't see Rebels, especially season 4 Rebels, would it matter to you? And that's hard to deconstruct for us, because we have seen seasons 1, 2, 3, and 4 Rebels many times and talked about them and praised them and analyzed them and debated them. So it's hard for me to look at it through that lens, although I certainly respect it. But really, and I have a good friend, Brian DeSutter, if you're listening, who has never seen Rebels. And Tom and I said to him at school, look, bud, before you watch any more Ahsoka, watch Rebels. Watch it, the animated Rebels. Now, do you have to? Not necessarily, because there's an interesting dynamic with Ahsoka and Sabine that we're, of course, going to talk about. But it's promising, but not fully satisfying quite through the first episode. And I see you shaking your heads, which means it's possible that you agree. Let's talk about some key moments and plot points that stick out. I think the best thing to me is, do you know what I'm going to say? It happens like in the first 20 seconds.
The crawl.
The crawl.
Yeah.
Like literally, I said aloud, the crawl. And Deanna was like, what? Because she was upstairs. I said, they're words. And I was like, yeah. But we've got a crawl of the text, but it's a different font. It's smaller and it's red and goes straight up instead of slanting a la Flash Gordon style. And that's when you just think, all right, strap yourselves in. We're gonna jump into light speed. That set the tone so great. So I just wanted to be the one to steal that one, so the rest of you can steal whatever you want.
Well,
I think that also contributes to the cinematic feel that you're talking about.
Yes.
It really sets the tone. Go ahead,
Well,
Russ.
and the ship right after that as well. So that is straight out of A New Hope. Like I turned to Monica and was just like, oh, that's homage to the New Hope right there. But with the lettering being red, it made me think of when the Bad Batch logo went red.
Yep. Or whenever Rebels would do it.
Like, oh, stuff is happening right now. This is not going to be petting Ewoks in the series.
No. No, I hope it never is.
I have to say, we haven't really mentioned so far, one of my favorite things about, especially the first episode, is the action. I feel like, especially with Ahsoka doing her thing. No notes. I have no notes about that. It just like her swirly cutting the holes open. With very cool.
Like the using what's telekinesis as a Superman corkscrew to go right down. That was awesome.
Yeah, and then how that comes back later when she's fighting all the droids, right? She uses that to outsmart or out kind of with them. And it's just I thought that was perfect. I was like, that's hard. That's hard to do because we're so used to seeing Ahsoka in animation flip around like crazy and do all these things that a normal human can't do. And so to translate that into live action stunts, to me, I was blown away. I was like, they 100% got that right.
Oh, I think the action is second to none here. The lightsaber effects, everything Ahsoka does with her blades. She's so poised and confident, and I think it's smart what they do at the end of that episode that Ahsoka doesn't show up at the end to face off against Shin Hati, because you just kind of feel like, well, Shin Hati, you're awesome, but come on, Ahsoka could beat you with her pinky. So that was really smart. Yeah, the action is terrific.
Yeah, and I think that's also every time we see Shin attack with her lightsaber, and I think you all were hinting at it earlier of, okay, she seems feral to me.
Yep.
That is the word that I use with her body language, her eyes, her approach to the attack. She is feral, and she has been adopted into this home by Baylan, and it's like, I'm going to teach you these ways, but she inherently has this,
dangerous
the demeanor to her that allows her to edge up there.
I agree. She just exudes this like ferocity that is it's sort of contained, like purposefully contained of her own accord, but you know that it's there. Even when she's fighting Sabine at the end, I feel like she's holding it back. I do love, you mentioned this earlier, I love the intro, the rock star intro with Sabine. I will forever think of rock and roll. I think of Sabine now, thanks to this show. But that entrance was just so classic. And Ross, this was your first look at Sabine. I would love to have been a fly on the wall when you were watching this for the first time.
Yeah, I think it was one of those kind of all the lights were out, but I'm sure I gave off a little bit of glow and lit up the room a little bit. Did you see the Loth cats drawn on the back of her helmet?
Yes.
Like those little details, I was just like, oh, thank you. Like that is Hasbro. When are you putting that helmet out? Because that is like, that's immediately being added at that point. But the music started playing and it all happened. And it was just like, oh my God, here we go. Like, this is it. And of course, I had to go look up right away, like, what is the music that Sabine's listening to? And the name of the song is Igya Ka. It was written by Kevin Kiner, his daughter Dina Kiner.
No way.
Ludwig Göransson, and his often music production partner, Noah Gorlick. And the vocals are by Sarah Tudzen from the Illuminati Hotties. And this was written expressly for this. And I was just like, well, when's this first album coming out?
Spotify. Yeah.
This is going to happen. And it couldn't have encapsulated her better. Jen, I wrote down, my note here is Sabine is rock and roll. So
Really?
it was that same exact thing of, yes. And I think I was even having the discussion here where I was just like, yeah, this is why I love this character so much. And it is that anti-authority, but in a smart, measured approach to it of, I'm not being an anarchist. I have a cause and I'm causing this trouble. It is good trouble.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
While we're taking a little bit of a break, this is a great time to talk about the official coffee of Coffee with Kenobi. That is Thomas Coffee. Thomas Coffee started in 1905 and has grown and established itself as a premier coffee. They have over 25 different flavors of coffee, including classics like almond, hazelnut, French vanilla, and more. And for the more adventurous coffee drinkers, they have offerings like banana hazelnut, chocolate raspberry, maple bacon, and, well, you just got to check thomascoffee.com. You won't believe the offerings that they have. Thomas Coffee is known for 5 different single origin coffees with a variety of different blends and roast profiles. This expertise in coffee craft is built on hard work and rooted in over a century of dutifully cultivating a network of coffee partners throughout the world, from conscientious growers in the finest coffee regions on earth to skilled roasters and blenders. I got my sample when I started talking with Thomas Coffee about working with them, and I was so excited about the results. You know, you never know what you're going to get, and my wife and I brewed a pot, smelled great, so that's a good start. And then we tasted it, and we looked at each other, our eyes got wide, and we said, yep, this is it. This is a perfect coffee to work with me in Coffee with Kenobi. It's delicious. It is, I really, truly cannot recommend it enough. It is my 100% go-to coffee. They roast their coffee in-house to make sure they are sending out the best possible products to Thomas Coffee customers, and I can personally, easy for me to say, vouch for that. Thomas Coffee ships nationwide too. You can order Thomas Coffee on their website, thomascoffee.com, and find them on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Thomas Coffees. For my Coffee with Kenobi listeners, you can use a discount code DANZCWK10 for 10% off your order. That's DANZCWK10 for 10% off your order. Be sure to use that code and enjoy your coffee. And it's refreshing, I think. Seeing Lothal in live action is just terrific. And I almost had to keep reminding myself, hey, you've never seen this live action before. Because it just was so beautifully seamless. And then seeing Clancy Brown as Ryder Azadi, oh my gosh. First of all, that guy has just got one of the greatest voices I've ever heard. But the way he carried himself, and did you notice it was a Jai, is that his name, that walks out also, that he has him appease the crowd? He's one of the cadets that trains with Ezra in the first season of Rebels. I recognize the name, and I looked up, I'm like, yep, that's him. So I love that they're doing that. Like, these are deep cuts that you don't need to know. Like, it doesn't really matter that you know who Ryder Azadi is, honestly. But for us as fans, this is just like a living, breathing Easter egg. That's really, really good. This whole opening act is really predicated upon a map. And you both mentioned Indiana Jones before, which of course makes sense, especially because it's a Lucasfilm property. But this map somehow contains this way to find Thrawn, and by proxy Ezra Bridger himself. What do we make of this map, and what are your thoughts on that whole sequence, or just the concept? That basically the map is the MacGuffin. This cool looking giant snitch Rubik's Cube combination is the MacGuffin.
So all of that stuff really reminded me of the Bad Batch episode called Entombed. It's the one with the giant,
oh yes,
like kaiju mech thing.
Yes.
That they with the ignition key,
mm-hmm.
right, or anti-ignition key, and that kind of got my mind reeling in terms of what actually I'm on the edge of my seat to uncover. Like, where are we going, and what is the sort of story behind this? Who are these ancient beings? And then, I was like, are these the ancients? Because that's sort of what everyone referred to in the Bad Batch episode, were the people who created all those things that they find, right? And it's a similar thing where they're unlocking all these puzzles and going through these sort of Indiana Jones-esque trials to try to unlock stuff. And then I remembered in the final season of Rebels, aren't there those cave paintings where Ezra's like, oh, these beings came down, they must have been Jedi. And so I'm like, is this all the same thing? And we're kind of working our way towards this massive lore reveal, and that to me was extremely exciting.
Yeah, it is. And that goes back to the mysticism that you talked about earlier. There's Tomb Raider elements, there's Indiana Jones elements. There are, so many different references you can look at.
Romancing the Stone? Actually, I've never seen those.
Well, yeah. I mean, we can talk about Billy Ocean music all you want.
Hey, man, when the going gets tough.
I was afraid you were going to say National Treasure. And I'm like, let's not.
Oh, well, it did cross my mind.
But it makes it fun. I'm glad it moved so fast and that it wasn't drawn out. Like, okay, yep, found the map, got it. Sabine figured it out. Yep, awesome. Now let's get moving. So I think as a setup episode or setup pair of episodes, it worked well in that regard, where it's just like, okay, here's an encapsulated element of the story. We've just established all this stuff, and now we can really take off and go into light speed with all of these stolen hyperdrives.
Sure. Well, if I had a Star Wars bingo card, I wouldn't have hoped to get map on it, because we saw maps already in The Force Awakens and then The Rise of Skywalker. And it's just sort of a plot device that I don't always associate with Star Wars. It didn't bother me per se, but I remember thinking, oh, a map. Okay, I'll go with it. It's hard not to think, in this mystical galaxy that's so far away and that Thrawn is hidden, why would we even have a map of this? My only expectation or understanding of this is maybe wherever he is, and we do get a planet, you have to have the captions on to kind of catch it because it goes really, really quickly, and the name is escaping me now. Did either of you write it down by chance?
They are, well, it's sitting outside of, they're in the Denab system.
Okay.
And the planet is Cetos.
Cetos, there you go. Okay. So my assumption is there are maps to this galaxy, and the fact that the Night Sisters understand that and how that works and are able to get to there, and it's in their temple, there must be something to that galaxy. And it just so happens that Thrawn is there, and we do learn that she has been in contact with Thrawn somehow, probably through her witch abilities, which are sort of loosely tied into the Force. That was confirmed, by the way, in the Star Wars book, to be honest. So you should look into that. And I did talk to the guy who wrote it, and he did in fact confirm that for me, because that was me. So I was really excited to see that explained like that, because we really haven't seen that. And for people who have not watched the Clone Wars and Rebels, they probably are not completely aware that magic even exists in the Star Wars universe. But it does. It's like another sort of a version of the Force, very similar to what the Lasats have.
I do want to clarify that planet, that is where the ship is waiting with the hyperdrives to go. So that's not the place they're hunting for Thrawn, but just in case that was confusing to anyone.
No, thank you very much for clarifying that. So I don't know. I as always, all these things, I very much want to maintain a wait and see. It's so silly to pass judgment or make any kind of a guess on 2 episodes. So it's intriguing. It's intriguing. It's not a MacGuffin, I think, that I needed, but it moves the plot forward, and here we are. Then, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, just one more thought.
Please.
Since we're already talking about it, the 2 things. One is I actually saw a thematic parallel potentially between this idea of unlocking puzzles and finding maps with what I think is actually the emotional core of the series, which is the relationship between Ahsoka and Sabine, right? That they're their relationship is sort of locked. Like they can't seem to unlock each other and come to a place of understanding, right? They constantly refer to each other as difficult,
Yes.
right? And so I feel like as we kind of unlock all of these puzzles and kind of solve these mysteries, I feel like at the same time we're going to be slowly unlocking the tension and kind of the conflict between Ahsoka and Sabine. They'll get unstuck by the end of the season, hopefully.
Which I love. I love that. I thought about that. Yeah, this is a nice little metaphor there, and it's even in the title, Master and Apprentice, right? Which initially you think it's about the two villains, but it's most likely about Ahsoka and Sabine. Hugh Yang, played by David Tennant, plays a pretty significant role in these first two episodes, and I was aware of him. I was ambivalent. I mean, I thought he was a cool concept, but I didn't really spend a lot of time in my Star Wars brain thinking about him. But I absolutely love him in this series so far. I think he brings a lot of gravity to things. I think that he adds just really small bits of humor. I like how he plays off of Ahsoka. And I like he's just sort of a calming presence. He just says he's logical. But I think he is kind of a scene stealer too. Really, really, really enjoyed Hu Yang so far.
Yeah, and how he was a tool to figure out who Balin was is fantastic. And I knew of the character, and I was like, oh, you know what? Let me brush up a little bit. But he taught Yoda and Mace Windu how to put their lightsabers together.
That's right.
Like this isn't somehow here's roll this droid off of the conveyor belt into here. Been there, done that. Oh yeah. Oh, Yoda. Oh, when he was Grogu's size, here's what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're getting out of this character, and that's another special element. I can just imagine Favreau and Filoni sitting there and being like, "Oh, we can do this."
I thought he gave us more than a little bit of humor. I was cracking up every time he said something, and I feel like in my notes I wrote Hu Yang dropping truth bombs.
Yes,
because I feel like his function is to kind of break the tension in a lot of the scenes and to make them not awkward, but then also kind of say the things that the characters can't say to each other. Like in the second episode where he basically tells Sabine, like, you're the only one getting in your own way. Like, you're the one wasting your own time. And just how he's like telling off all these characters. He does the same thing to Ahsoka. Like and I love that he's serving that purpose, that he's kind of like, and we have a long tradition of sassy droids in Star Wars, but I feel like he's the one who's like the tell it like it is droid.
He's like a pragmatic sassy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when is he going to be talking to Chopper is what I want to know. Oh,
that'll be fun.
That'd be great.
I think sometime during SummerSlam or WrestleMania, probably.
Yes.
The other thing for this first part, I guess, is just the ending and the fight that happens anytime Sabine. I feel like if they made like a dog or cat food bowl with little kibbles in it, everyone would buy it at Celebration because it would remind them of Sabine feeding that loath cat, which could not have been more cute. But that whole sequence when those the HK assassin droids, when they show up, when they fight Ahsoka earlier, when they show up in this one, the fact that they destroy Sabine's evidence, it was great fun seeing her kind of figure this out. And I mentioned this earlier in the show. I love the fact that she's pretty blunt about, you abandoned me, like you left me. And Sabine feels rejected. We've seen her vulnerable a couple of times in Rebels, and it goes pretty deep for her because for all of her toughness, she's got a big heart and she wants to belong. She wants to have connections with people. She's very much living by herself. And I think she counted on Ahsoka, and we're going to learn more about that relationship and what transpired there. I probably got more questions over the past 48 hours about that relationship than anything. And I'm like, no, this isn't in a book. This is nothing that's happened before. This is new for all of us. And it creates a very, very interesting dynamic. The fight sequence is great, learning that she has modified Ezra's lightsaber and made it her own, because he says, yeah, he built it, he constructed, but it is yours now. is just really, really great. There's a lot of key things here, but I want to see what the both of you think about just that ending sequence and Sabine living there, and just there's a lot of key details.
Yeah, I think just being able to see, we get to see the Mandalorian Sabine, like when she's under attack, and the HK droid has, got her in his arms or in its arms, and it is just flailing, but it is a controlled flailing of, I'm going to try to do this now. Oh, I can reach the gun now. It is her Mandalorian survival skills that come out there. Another part that I loved, because the same thing happened for Ezra in season 4 of Rebels, is getting the warning from the Loth Cat.
Yep.
Right before something's about to happen, the Loth Cat hissed, and it saved both of them in their different scenarios. So just those little pieces again, where as a huge Rebels fan, I'm just like, oh, that's awesome. So seeing her there, knowing how excited she was to solve the puzzle, because that's what she does. Like,
and she comes to life when she's doing it.
Yeah.
She really does.
And end result is, I don't know what's going to be done with this after the fact, like the machine that she had built previously that I won't get into now, but here's what they're going to do with it. I just wanted the challenge and the opportunity to solve the challenge and show how smart I am. And that's what this was again. And she lost it. And it's just like, now I'm going to take it out on this visitor with this lightsaber. Who the heck is this?
And there's like this wonderful innocence about her too, that's not childish, which I found really another reason to really connect with this character and performance. Jen?
I really loved how both Sabine and Ahsoka are both right and wrong.
Yes.
Based on what happens.
Talk
right?
about
because,
that. Yeah.
Sure. Because Ahsoka, it's not a great teaching moment, right? Because she's just trying to control Sabine and being like, you need to do what I say, right? And then Sabine, obviously that doesn't work on a student like Sabine, right? We have to find alternate methods to get through to her. And so I like how she's wrong about that, but then she's right about, well, if we take the map out of this ship where it's safe, people are coming for it, something might happen to it, and then that turns out to be right. And Sabine instantly knows that, right? She's like, she says it. She says, this is the one thing, and then I screwed it up. Like it was like she was like, I didn't listen to her, and now I lost this map, right? And so and then I love how Sabine is right, because she could have only figured it out by being in the right headspace and being in the right environment. Like that was the right they never would have unlocked the map, I think, if she hadn't gone and done that, if she hadn't just disobeyed Ahsoka and gone to her house and with her cat and all her stuff, and where she could think properly. But at the same time, she was wrong, because they lost it, right? And it was in danger. So yeah, I like the complexity of that they're and that's what makes their tense relationship at the start of this so interesting, and I'm invested in it, because that they're both in the wrong, and they both need to listen to each other, but they're also both just really stubborn. So yeah, it's really an interesting addition to sort of the legacy of teacher-student relationships in Star Wars.
And I just thought of this, and Jen, you would be much more on the pulse of this than I am, but Ahsoka passes the Bechdel test, right? Is that
yes.
so actively explored in scholarly writing? Because I hope that it is.
It should be. I mean, it's pretty huge, and I think really speaks to how far Star Wars has come on that front through animation, right? Because all of these characters are from animated series. And they're all strong female characters who are talking to each other. So for those of you who don't know, the Bechdel test is, do you have multiple female characters, like two or more female characters, talking to each other about something other than a man?
Yes, about a boy or a relationship.
Yeah. And so I think this passes with flying colors, because other than the loose needling reference to Anakin by Hera. I think that's about it. Like that's.
Well, even when Shin Hati and Morgan Elsbeth talk to each other, it's like that passes the Bechdel test too. There's two women, they talk to each other. It's not about a boy, right? And that was a pretty kind of a rarity for an extremely long time. Like Jane Austen wouldn't have passed the Bechdel test, and I love Jane Austen. So, of course, it's a different time frame and blah, all that. But yeah, pretty cool stuff. Why don't we let's give a letter grade on this, because I know we're running really, really long on time, and I know we've got a lot to explore with the second episode. But let's give a letter grade and any sort of closing thoughts on Master and Apprentice. Ross, we'll start with you for this one.
I'm going to start, I would say B, but I'm going to give it a B+ because of the introduction of Sabine and how spot on that was for me. And the Lothcats and seeing Lothal and those elements. I think we just have, I enjoyed this. I think there's just so much more in store that we're going to love moving forward. This is a nice, good step into the water prior to the cannonball that may be coming.
Love it. Did you just come up with that on the spot? That was pretty good. Attaboy.
Nice.
Fantastic. Nice. This is why you're one of the regular co-hosts for this series. All right, Jen, letter grade and any final thoughts on this one?
I'm going to go B+ because, I'm going to basically say what Ross said, but in the context of teaching. When I'm grading student papers, I know I have a really good student in my hands, but their first paper, it's really hard where I want to give it a higher grade, but I'm also thinking about the future of, well, if this student goes as far as I think they're going to go, is giving them 3 A's in a row really going to be that helpful for their growth and development, right? Like, is it going to be more helpful? You don't want to give them a grade they don't deserve, but like, is giving more room to sort of reflect the growth that I think they're going to have. So that's why I'm going B+. I generally very much enjoyed the episode. But I think in terms of where compared to, I know I'm going to give later episodes an A probably. That's my prediction. Right. So
interesting. I feel like I was a little more critical of this than the two of you, and I think my grade's going to be better than the two of yours. I might give it an A-. I also very much subscribe to the, what kind of paper am I reading here, and what is the potential that is there. But from a visual standpoint, from a mythological and cinematic standpoint, from the emotional investment I had throughout the entire thing, through Sabine being an absolutely riveting, sucking me in like a black hole in a way I did not expect. And also knowing that if I it's not fair for me to grade it on what I want it to be, but what it actually is. It's the first chapter. It's the first part of an 8-part story. So those things in mind, even though Hera really did not work for me at all, I would like to see a little bit more of a multifaceted Ahsoka Tano instead of a kind of a one-note conceit. I'm still going to give it an A-. Because maybe it's going to be like Indiana Jones. Even one that's not as good, like pizza, is still better than anything else.
Yeah.
31 flavors.
That's right. Well, let's talk about the second one. This one is called Part 2, Toil and Trouble. It's a shorter episode, and hopefully we will... I don't want to take up too much more of everyone's time, but I do think there's some key things to talk about here. We'll start back with you, Jen. One word and overall thoughts on Toil and Trouble.
One word would probably be... See, I'm going to steal your thing and maybe do 2 words.
Yes, it's allowed.
Something like, because I had come up with, I'm coming with this up with this on the fly because mystical was sort of my all-encompassing word for both episodes. But that's a sentence. I was going to say the race is on. I feel like
that's hyphenated. I checked the rubric. Seems fine.
Okay, great. We'll allow it. But I really feel like this episode does an excellent job of sort of, and this speaks to what Ross alluded to earlier, where it's like we got there pretty quick. Like we unlocked the map. The map wasn't a thing we were chasing after for several episodes, and we know what the goal is. Clear. So maybe clear is a good one word. That we know, Morgan Elsbeth, her motivations are clear. She's trying to find Thrawn. Ahsoka and Sabine, or at least Ahsoka, her motivations are clear. She wants to get to Thrawn first because they can't. As she tells Sabine, this is not necessarily just about Ezra, but it's about preventing another war. And then for Sabine, her motivations are clear, is that she's so desperate to find Ezra. Right? It's clearly just wrecked her that he's gone, and that's why Hera is so confident. Like, oh, she'll help you. Right? She's in on this mission, and that's ultimately kind of what pushes her to get past her kind of insecurities and lack of confidence and put the armor back on, cut her hair, suit up,
like Barney would say.
Yes, very different kind of suit.
Very, very different in every way, shape, and form. Ross?
I'm going greed because it's a word that is used when they are on Corellia, and there's very big undertones into that element, and maybe they hung on that a little bit too long, but I think it was important to get that out there. So I thought that was big, but it also ties into Balin talking about power. And that also represents, I know me, probably the two of you, and most people I know that like Star Wars and Ahsoka, I want more. And this left me wanting more, and I can't wait until the next episode. So I'm greedy for more content coming out.
Excellent. My word for this is better. This one's better. It's just better. It's better in pacing. The first one had a very nice slow burn that could be off-putting for some people. I enjoy the slow burn, but if every episode was that slow, it might have been a little bit more more arduous to enjoy. This was spot on in every way. Hera was better. She's still not where I hope she will be, but she was better. The struggle between Ahsoka and Sabine continued to evolve and become more compelling. One of my other favorite parts about both episodes, is that I've been pretty candid, especially in season 3 of Mandalorian, that the volume has become a distraction. And in here, it's not. I mean, I know that's used in some areas, but there's a lot of practical stuff. And obviously, they're not building that massive shipyard on Corellia and stuff like that. But maybe the technology is better. I don't know what it is, but everything was a lot stronger to me. And it just, when, like you said, Ross, when it was over, I was like, man, a week is going to be a really long time. I'm hungry for more, and I'm very happy about that. So that's why better. Okay, Jen, tell us what's in your notes, some key ideas from this that you'd like to bring up.
Sure. So I talked about it a little bit, but I really love the idea of, earlier I mentioned the mysticism, and sort of like myth and Star Wars have gone hand in hand for a really long time. But I feel like this is one of the first times that myth is openly discussed within the story amongst the characters. There's what, in, I think it's when they go to Malachor in Rebels, Ahsoka says something like, there's always a bit of truth in legends.
Yes.
And this is sort of, I feel like this episode really is picking up on that idea, to sort of say, like, that the myth, things that were just stories that were told to younglings, are now going to become reality. Like, they're going to understand them better. There's because every time I come on here, I have to drag in some kind of academic quote. So the one that I have for today.
That's one of the reasons why I want you on the show.
I know the pressure was on. I was like, Dan's going to be expecting some kind of academic thing. I got to figure out what that is for this show so far. But there's an anthropologist named Claude Lévi-Strauss, and who sort of founded the school of thought called structuralism, which very much is like tied into, it's sort of like dissecting myths into their component parts. It's what Joseph Campbell sort of drew from. I think, he would have studied Lévi-Strauss before he came up with all his stuff. But Lévi-Strauss says myth is language functioning on an especially high level where meaning succeeds practically at taking off from the linguistic ground on which it keeps on rolling. And so the idea behind that is that there are myths kind of like the sort of universal component parts of a myth that are kind of recognizable, but then there's myths as they are told, and they're kind of like, they have different meanings. And so I'm really, really excited to see sort of what very cornerstones of Star Wars mythology that we're going to learn, but then also how these characters kind of like take that into their own understanding. And like, what does that mean? How does that affect them as individuals in the galaxy? And so, yeah, I'm just very excited to see where this goes. And I hope it goes. I hope we get that. I hope, I hope the ground keeps on rolling, and that there's language spoken and language told and understood, and that we get that on both of those levels.
And Jen, it's funny because I saw that quote was on one of those boards at Target. All the Live, Laugh, Love ones were sold out, but there were a whole bunch that had that on there.
You need a big wall for that one, I think.
So most people, besides you can't see this right now, but my soul is actually crying with joy right now. That is such a wonderful quote. That nails it. That absolutely nails it. And that's where the love of story that Dave Filoni brings to this epic. And Jon Favreau did say at Celebration Europe, this is Dave Filoni's magnum opus. And we're starting to see scenes and hints as to that and how it's going to play out for itself. Ross, I didn't mean to cut you off. You were going to say something.
Oh, no, not at all. Like that was, I just threw in that quip knowing how much I appreciated the quote, but knowing that you would be giddy about it as well. So, Jen, always well done.
And so it's not the same Levi Strauss that makes blue jeans, right?
No.
Yeah. Just wanted to clarify that for the people in the back who weren't quite listening.
Google this.
Yes. Yeah. You'll see very different ideas. I think I keep railing on the whole Sabine or the Hera thing. Hera's better here. I talked about this a little bit earlier in the show, much earlier in the show, like 5 hours ago when we started recording. I think that's sarcasm, but she shows much more of a nurturing side. The only thing that bugged me was that whole explosion thing, which we already talked about. But when she is working with Ahsoka and they're on that little transport going through Corellia, going through those massive shipyards. Have you ever been to the back of Menards and had to pick up something? That's kind of what it looked like on a much, much bigger scale. And just their honesty about Hera has a gift. And I hope that Mary Elizabeth Winstead continues to show this. Hera has this wonderful ability to get you to think and look at things differently without peer pressure or telling you that's what you have to think and feel. That is a leader. If you can do that as a parent, you have struck solid gold. If you can do it as an educator, very, very similar. And I feel like that conversation between the two of them on that transport, as you see these sinister ne'er-do-wells looking, you just know they're going to do something insidious, and they do. But I thought that was a very key emotional anchor to this entire second episode.
I feel like retroactively, after watching this episode, parts of The Mandalorian season 3 make so much more sense.
Oh, tell me why.
Because, and mostly because of the shipyard stuff. So this is what made, when you said that's what made me think of it. But the idea that the New Republic is sort of like drowning in its own bureaucracy, and that something like this could happen because they're not looking, and the whole thing about, when we see the people kind of come out of the woodwork loyal to the Empire still, that very much reminded me of sort of the I'm gonna get the name wrong. It's not assimilation. The like program that just can't mix in. I can't remember now. Oh, it's terrible. It wasn't that long ago that we watched this. It starts with an A though, I think. It's like a program, amnesty program. Thank you.
Amnesty.
Okay.
Thank you, me, for coming up with my own answer. And that I was like, oh, okay, so those episodes in the Mandalorian season 3, which, I'm not going to relitigate whether or not people like those, but some people were confused by why they were there. But to me, it's sort of like we're working towards this post fall of the Empire world where the New Republic is failing. And so, and the idea that no one really knows how to move forward. Like that seems to be the big struggle of the galaxy in this show, like kind of in the backdrop of like, people who used to be Jedi don't know what to do now. People who like were loyal to the Empire. Who do they follow? Right. Like, but they still are loyal somehow. And like, what is everybody doing? Well, who are people's allegiances? And I just feel like it seems like a lot more cohesive as a story, as a time and a place in Star Wars.
And it's really much more relatable, isn't it? Because in the real world, history and society is chock full of people who make choices because of familiarity and patterns and sort of your own sort of schedule, right? Without sort of thinking outside the box and realizing, hey, maybe this isn't the best choice for me. I find it interesting. And at first I was like, what is wrong with these people? Are they really that empty-headed? And maybe they, in their minds, this is what's been spun and they believe that it's reality. I mean, I always think it's really cool. And you see this a little bit with Cara Dune in Alderaan, or with Lost Stars, the Claudia Gray novel, where for the Empire, it's like, wait a minute, we're on our massive space station, keeping the galaxy safe. And these like terrorists came in and blew it up. Now, we don't see it that way because, we are not evil, but evil could be a certain point of view from this perspective. So then it's almost like, well, you don't empathize with these people and you know that they're not favorable types. They're clearly antagonists, but you get it. You get the idea that it's, people would say that when people would say Ahsoka was the gray Jedi, I would just cringe because she's not. She thinks of the world more than just black and white. So from that perspective, she is gray. But there's a reason her kyber crystals were purified and became white, because she's good. She chooses good. To do evil, I think there has to be full working knowledge and full freedom to commit these acts. Right. So these people know this. I'm going on a random tangent about a bunch of bozos in a shipyard. But I think that introduces some really cool ideas of morality and right and wrong that we're going to really enjoy in this series.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the greed. Is what are you looking for? And that stood out to me so much from this episode. Even though we had great action sequences, we had Chopper doing his thing, we had some incredible elements, but that really stood out to me, and kind of the bravery to go out and tell that story and have it take maybe a little bit longer than it needed to, but it really drove the point home.
I agree. Any other key ideas from this episode that we haven't brought up that we need to talk about? I feel like we've encompassed a lot of cool things, but we could easily go for much, much longer, I'm sure.
I think the instinctual elements of Ahsoka and Sabine and how they came into play, because all of a sudden we've got Ahsoka going to the communications tower, and she's like, yep, I thought you'd show up. And I was hoping you'd show up, and got the droid head. She shows up with it. Sabine, who, was probably this close to dying, is like, oh, let me get up. I can hotwire this head right now and fix this. With the other droids being like, what are you doing? You're going to blow us up. Like, oh, it'll be fine.
It was great.
And it was just like, they're starting to become them again. And that, seeing that kind of the light bulb kind of flickering a little bit, that's where it started to flicker. And I was like, oh, we're back. We're coming on. We're about to go back online.
And isn't the tech great in these sequences? Like even like it's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and some of it feels futuristic. But this stuff kind of feels like you could have seen George hotwiring it from some model kits in the late 70s, but it just works so well.
Yeah, loved it.
I think a good place to circle back to now is Ahsoka's trauma from her past, because I think that is very much, because I keep thinking about this question that you asked earlier, Dan, of like, what is this doing for casual fans who have not seen Rebels or the Clone Wars, or like, maybe they've seen some, but not all of it. And what's going to mean something to them. And I feel like there's so much subtext that I'm bringing to watching this episode in terms of Ahsoka's failures. I mean, like, I think something we haven't even mentioned yet is based on the timeline where the show takes place, Vader/Anakin has just died. Right? So it's not even just like, there's a lot of trauma in Rebels during the Twilight of the Apprentice arc where Ahsoka has to confront that, like, her leaving.
Well, at least 5 years, right? Has to be.
Right, but that's long enough that.
True. Well, or is it?
Or these are a little bit earlier, I thought.
I just assume it's during Mandoverse timeline, but I don't. That's the beauty sort of this is. I mean, is it before Mandalorian season 1? I always kind of thought it wasn't, but maybe I'm wrong.
Right, I think. Oh, that's interesting. I would have assumed that since it's coming after the Mandalorian, that in the timeline it would be after, but that's not necessarily true.
Same.
Because Dave Filoni, when he I remember he made a big deal out of, the epilogue at the end of Rebels. Don't assume when that's happening.
Right. And are we to assume that at the end when Ahsoka shows up in Sabine and they're going to team up, that's not the epilogue in live action, is it? Because Ahsoka doesn't have the staff. She's not wearing all white. I tend to think that epilogue was before anything that happened in this Disney Plus series, and whatever their mission was, it was a failure, clearly, and that's where the rift happened. That's how I sort of assume it is to be. But what do the two of you think?
I think that's interesting. I love the shot-for-shot component that they did with this relative to that from Rebels. Like, it is, someone on Instagram put them side by side or one on top of the other and watch the whole thing through, and it is like to the beat.
So you think it's the same scene?
It at least is paying homage to it. She doesn't have the staff. Sure. She doesn't have the note, but it is maybe that's Dave's favorite scene he's ever done, and he's like, I want to recreate this, and it's not 1-to-1 for the story, but it's 1-to-1 for the filmmaker.
It might signify a parallel moment where, like, let's see where they were in the epilogue, and then using the visual language, like, to mirror it, to say, like, oh, now see that it looks the same, but these characters in such a different place in relationship to each other and for themselves.
Right.
So.
And it's not lost on me. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I just wanted to say, I didn't mean to open a hornet's nest of, like, Star Wars chronology. That was not my intention.
No, I think that's great. I love stuff like that, and we all do. That's fun. I think, and people are thinking about this too, so I hopefully helps them kind of line it up, because this isn't in the Timelines book, because it wasn't public knowledge then, so it won't be in there.
And it's very healthy and adult of me to not sleep as well because I think of things like that.
Hey, I think we are in the same camp, my friend.
This is a safe space for us.
That's right. That's right. You're among friends on Coffee with Kenobi, always.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is... yes.
Well, I feel really, really good about where we're at. I think, again, there's so much more, but this is a much, much longer episode than we have been doing for a long time. But I think these first two parts warranted that. I am very much looking forward to continuing to see what happens in Ahsoka, and I'm extremely excited knowing that I've got the two of you cruising through hyperspace with me as we try to unravel this delicious mythology that is Ahsoka. Jen, Ross, thank you both so much. You are awesome, as always. I knew when I told Tom that this was like the trio for this, he's like, oh, that's a great group. I'm like, yeah, I'm very happy I'm going to have to be on my A game with the two of you. And I couldn't thank you both enough. Jen, please let everybody know about what you've got going on and where they can find you on social media.
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram at Sopchockchai, Sopchockchai, Instagram and Threads, although those are like kind of the same thing, or they're a pair. And you can find my writing on the longtake.substack.com. Right now, if you go there, I have a sort of an Ahsoka preview post up. It's one I wrote kind of in desperation at the last minute to sort of steady my nerves in anticipation of watching these two episodes. So it's basically a love letter to Ahsoka and why I love the character. And so see, that's what you'll find if you go there.
Super fun. And don't you have a podcast as well?
Oh, that's true. Yes, it's not Star Wars. So
It's all right.
I think it's weird it up. But yeah, the Substack you can also find, and you can also find it on wherever you listen to your podcast. It's called The Long Take Review, and that is a film podcast with one eye always on the Oscar race.
Which is great. And by the way, if you ever need a guest co-host, I'd be happy to send you my resume.
Oh, absolutely. Just let me know what movie you want to talk about.
Oh, man. Ross, again, as always, you and I had the best time seeing Bruce Springsteen at Wrigley Field a few weeks ago, and always love chatting with you, and super excited that I get to co-pilot this with Jen and you, of course. So please let everybody know about all the things you've got going on.
Yeah, so I'm excited to take these 2 pages of notes that I have from this discussion to craft my Fantha Tracks recap that they put as part of a group recap on fanthatracks.com. Thank you, Mark Newbold and team there. But then my own podcast that Dan has been on very recently with an Escape Pod episode is the Album Cockpit Podcast. So discussing people's favorite albums or music experiences at this point, and what it means to everyone. Like, music has that deep meaning to so many of us, and that's where it was so cool with Sabine in this episode, and starting with that music and a rock song written for her. So that's what it's all about. And every time I hear that song, I'm going to think about her doing that stunt underneath that other ship, and just feeling like, I'm fawning over you once again.
That is going to do it for this week's Coffee with Kenobi. Please go to our website, coffeewithkenobi.com, for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, videos, and so much more. And it's a great place to enter any contests that are going on, too. The official travel partner of Coffee with Kenobi is MEI and Mousefan Travel. That's coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefan travel. You can go there for a no-cost, no-obligation quote, and they will help you plan your magical vacation to all things Disney, including the East and West Coast homes of Galaxy's Edge, Walt Disney World, and Disneyland. Looking to book that Disney cruise? Mousefan Travel can help make things as easy as possible and give you that peace of mind we all appreciate when planning our family vacations. And I'm not just saying that. I use them for the show and for my family trips, as I've said many, many times over the years. But Mousefan Travel is not just Disney. Becky Mankin and her incredible team can help you plan your trips to Star Wars Celebration or any vacation you have been dreaming about worldwide. Any of the 50 states, Europe, and beyond. MEI and Mousefan Travel are experts in travel all over the world. Plus, it's a great way to support Coffee with Kenobi. Again, the website is coffeewithkenobi.com/Mousefan Travel. As an avid coffee lover, it is also my honor to partner with Thomas Coffee, the official brew of Coffee with Kenobi. They have offered us an exclusive code for CWK listeners. Head over to thomascoffee.com to check them out, and make sure to use the discount code of DANZCWK at checkout to save 10% on your order. CWK Live is Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time at coffeewithkenobi.com/live. You can join our CWK Cafe Facebook group at coffeewithkenobi.com/community. It's a wonderful place to go for Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-friendly, spoiler and drama-free place. Coffee with Kenobi is possible because of the members of the CWK Alliance. Thanks to you, this podcast, CWK Live, event coverage, and so much more comes to life. Find out how you can help the show for as little as $1 a month by joining the CWK Alliance, and you will receive access to CWK Pour-Over an exclusive weekly audio and video podcast not heard anywhere else. Members at the CWK Alliance All-Star level receive a video edition of CWK Pro and access to a private Facebook group as well. Plus, CWK Alliance Grandmasters join me for a monthly live video call. Go to coffeewithkenobi.com/CWK Alliance to sign up for our Patreon page, which is the CWK Alliance. And 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital. If you'd like to reach out, email me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com. Connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zer, MRZEHR, or on Instagram at danzercwk. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Coffee with Kenobi is all over social media, including Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok. And you can also give the show a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, or subscribe to Coffee with Kenobi's YouTube channel. Please, if you're listening, take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. Every review helps move us up the search list when you type in Star Wars Podcast and helps bring more people to this Coffee with Kenobi family. If you love the logo, go to coffeewithkenobi.com/shop for our TeePublic store for shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, stickers, laptop covers, and so much more. And oh, by the way, they have coffee mugs too. And if you want to start a podcast or expand your brand, I'm available at danzmedia.com, and I can also come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. Thank you so much for joining me as we got to celebrate and talk about the first 2 episodes of Ahsoka. Naturally, on the live show, we will be giving you a chance to share your top 5 moments and get your voice immediately shared to Coffee with Kenobi listeners all over the world. Thank you so much again, as always, for spending time with me. I really enjoy sharing a virtual cup of coffee with you and look forward to the next time. I'm Dan Zer, and remember, this is the podcast you're looking for. See you next time, friends.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.